All right, we begin our first show of 2010 now with the death of a political truism that doesn't seem to have survived 2009. The truism is the conventional wisdom that Republicans sure know how to do terror politics. 2010 being an election year, right now Republicans all over the country are busy waxing poetic about terrorism on campaign trails all around the country. For example, there's this gentleman in Minnesota.
I, like you, have seen that our country is being destroyed. I mean, this is, every generation has had to fight the fight for freedom. This is our fight. And this is our time. This is it. Terrorism, yes, but that's not the big battle. The big battle is in D.C. with the radicals. They're not liberals, they're radicals. They are destroying our country.
House candidate Ellen Quist of Minnesota. Terrorism isn't the big battle. The big battle's between us and the liberals. That sort of political speech right there is what it looks like when something that used to work for you stops working. Someone obviously once told that Republican congressional candidate in Minnesota, hey, you should campaign on terrorism. That always works out great for Republicans. That is the common wisdom, and it might have been true at one point, but it does actually matter how you do it. And if you're saying things like, I hate Democrats more than I hate Al-Qaeda, I'm pretty sure you're not doing it right. Now that the calendar has flipped to 2010, we're experiencing a little outbreak of Republicans blowing it. Republicans blowing something they used to be pretty good at, the politicization of terrorism. The latest is Republican Senator Kit Bond of Missouri. In trying to attack President Obama's handling of the Christmas Day underpants bomber, Mr. Bond stepped on the same rake that a number of his colleagues have already recently stepped on.
Do you think it was a mistake to charge Abdul-Muttalib as a criminal defendant?
Clearly. As you said in your interview, as soon as they got a lawyer, he lawyered up. We should have held him as an enemy combatant, tried him under the military commissions.
We should have held him as an enemy combatant. After facing questions about why he thinks President Obama is wrong to try the Christmas Day bomber in federal court, when President Bush made the exact same decision about the shoe bomber, Richard Reed, back in 2002, Senator Bond, after facing those questions, decided to double down, apparently without checking his own record. The senator is now seeking to go back in time to try to create the impression that he was against the shoe bomber being charged in federal court back in 2002, now calling it a mistake, even though Senator Bond made not one peep of protest about that at the time. In fact, at the time, the Justice Department, the Bush Justice Department, was prosecuting Richard Reed. At that time, Senator Kit Bond was asked specifically if he had any criticism of the Bush Justice Department's role in fighting terrorism. Senator Bond said he had none.
I believe that the Department of Justice is observing constitutional guidelines and safeguards, but they're going after people who come from areas of the world which might spawn terrorists, and I think that's appropriate.
In 2002, he said what the Justice Department was doing was appropriate. Now, looking back on it, he says, back in 2002, that was a huge mistake. Huge mistake to use the Justice Department for this sort of thing. How dare Obama do this now? This thing I said at the time was appropriate. Then there's Republican Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina. After facing pressure for putting an indefinite hold on President Obama's nominee to run transportation security, Mr. DeMint has now sort of caved, saying that he'll allow a vote on the TSA nominee as long as he gets time to debate the nomination on the Senate floor. While caving on the TSA issue, Senator DeMint continues to embarrass himself by pressing another issue.
A lot of us have been concerned over the last year that the president did seem to downplay the threat of terror. He doesn't use the word anymore.
Senator DeMint, how has he downplayed the risk of terror?
Well, it begins with not even being willing to use the word. The concern that a lot of us have had over the last year is we've even dropped the word terror.
You know, when you see Jim DeMint saying this sort of thing, it might be useful to remember that he's just making it up as he goes along. You should hear a little laugh track in your head when he does that, as evidenced by President Obama repeatedly on tape saying this word that Jim DeMint says he never says.
Terror and extremism that threatens the world's stability. Extremists sowing terror in pockets of the world, suffering and civil wars that breed instability and terror. New acts of terror.
When Jim DeMint says that Barack Obama never uses the word terror, he's lying. It should probably be pointed out when that happens. As we have noted here before, the outbreak of people inexpertly trying to politicize terrorism but blowing it. That effort sort of has a mascot in Republican Congressman Pete Hoekstra of Michigan. Mr. Hoekstra is now apparently unwilling to defend his decision to raise money off of the attempted murder of 300 Americans on Christmas Day.
Are you proud of that, of fundraising off of a national crisis like that?
Well, I've been leading on national security for the last 9 years that I've been on the Intelligence Committee. You know, over the last 2 to 3 months, I've been very concerned about where this administration has taken us on national security issues. The refusal to acknowledge that the Fort Hood attack was a terrorist attack.
But I'm asking about raising money off the attempted murder of 300 people 3 days after it occurred.
I am proud of the role that I have played in making sure that America is safe.
Mr. Hoekstra dodging that question not once, but twice yesterday. And that's actually a big change from the way the Hoekstra camp had been talking about his raising money off a terrorist attack against American citizens. Just last week, Mr. Hoekstra's campaign told us that Pete Hoekstra himself signed off on that fundraising letter and that we should expect more similar efforts from him. Just a few days later, Congressman Hoekstra has been forced to become embarrassed about this, now apparently unwilling to defend the effort when he's personally called out on it. Even as Mr. Hoekstra apparently realizes the step-on-the-rake faceplant that he has made here, trying to raise money off of the attempted murder of 300 Americans on Christmas Day, 3 days after it happened, even as Hoekstra finally starts to get embarrassed about that, the Republican Party seems to be following Mr. Hoekstra's lead. The National Republican Senatorial Committee sending out a fundraising pitch that reads in part, quote, "This country was one faulty detonator away from an American airliner being blown out of the sky. When a foreigner tries to blow up an airliner, it is an attempted terrorist attack. Will you please give $5 or $10 by midnight tomorrow so we have the money necessary to fight the Obama machine?" The National Republican Congressional Committee also sending out its own fundraising email using the specter of terrorist attacks against Americans to cash in. Republicans are doubling down on trying to raise money off of an attempted terrorist attack. And while some are trying to win the terror debate by actively attacking President Obama publicly, others are making a strategic decision to keep quiet. Peter Baker of the New York Times reported this weekend, quote, "A half dozen former senior Bush officials involved in counterterrorism told me before the Christmas Day incident that for the most part, they were comfortable with Obama's policies, although they were reluctant to say so on the record. Some worried they would draw the ire of Cheney's circle if they did. They generally resent Obama's anti-Bush rhetoric and are unwilling to give him political cover by defending him." Republicans are supposed to be good at politicizing terrorism. Yet here are former senior Bush administration officials actually telling a reporter that there are things they think are keeping the public safe that they will not publicly support because of partisan politics. They won't let anyone know they support these policies that they actually do support and think are good for the country because they're afraid of Dick Cheney being mad at them. They told that to a reporter. You know, keeping your name off of that quote is not going to be enough to help your cause if you're willing to admit to being that craven. Joining us now is Washington Post columnist E.J. Dionne. E.J., it's great to see you. Thank you for being here tonight.
Good to be with you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. It seems to me like there have been a lot of political missteps as people have tried to sort of politicize and capitalize off of terrorism in the wake of this Christmas Day incident. Are the people who are supposed to be good at this getting bad at this, or has the political context changed?
Well, you know, it's like a team that uses one play and does really great one season, the 2002 election, and it works great the next season, the 2004 election, and they figure they can use the same play over and over again and not adjust it. And I think what they ran into in the last week is the first couple of days, President Obama was trying to reassure people. A lot of folks thought he looked too laid back, wasn't engaged. If they had just hit him a little then and moved on, they might have gotten some mileage out of it. But instead, they sort of pushed way farther. Part of it was just over-politicization. A lot of people objected to the fundraising letter. Some of it was just pure mendacity, the notion that Obama doesn't use the word terror. And just part of it was hypocrisy. You know, the many examples where policies that President Bush pursued, that Obama is pursuing, suddenly became bad because Obama is pursuing the same policies. And that just didn't work. And so I think they took a situation where they might have gained a little ground, and at the end of it all, I think they lost ground in the last week.
And I think if we're going to sort of maintain the pseudo-sports metaphor here in terms of playing the same play, no, I think it's actually appropriate, because what this sort of seems like is an own goal on behalf of the Republicans. It seems like they've tried to turn this into an offensive maneuver like they always have, and it has backfired on them. They've ended up scoring a goal on themselves. And I don't feel, though, like Democrats have made political progress with this. Democrats